had a great week. This week, I wanted to create a video about a somewhat relevant topic at the moment, and that is the Olympics. The Olympics are actually summer of 2024. Olympics are actually going to come to a close this weekend, I believe. But the past 2 weeks have seen some exciting performances and just amazing feats of athletics. And yeah, just been my kids are really into it. My wife's super into it. I'm much more of a Winter Olympics guy, but several Olympics are pretty cool too. But because the Olympics are happening at the moment, there's been a couple of pieces of content that I've seen come across my way over the past 2 weeks around nutrition for Olympic athletes. I think this probably comes up every Olympics. I think it's always, for whatever reason, I don't know. I think I actually do understand why, but for whatever reason, humans are fascinated with what other humans eat. I don't know why that is, but I find it fascinating. I always find blog posts, videos, social media posts around how other humans eat fascinating because it really illustrates the different ways that humans have adapted to over the course of hundreds of thousands of years. But I think when it comes to athletes, especially high level athletes, people get really up in arms about, or not up in arms, but really interested in how people at the extreme end of human performance fuel the activity. And when you're in a sphere of health and wellness, where we're often, myself included, often touting the benefits and the reasons and the advantages of eating a more whole, unprocessed, natural diet, and that's going to lead nearly everyone to the best results. You look at the extreme athletes and the people who are at the top of their sport and the way some of these athletes eat. And it frankly goes against most of the things that we people in the health sphere that view as a healthy diet. Yet these people are seemingly at both the pinnacle of their athletic and like human capabilities, as well as their appear to be pretty healthy. Now, we obviously we don't know their health. Certainly some sports, depending on the nature of the sport, etc., it can definitely lead to being very fit, but also being unhealthy. Certainly the athletic phenotype of fit, but unhealthy on the inside, and the nature of the sport can sometimes lead to that result. And that's unfortunate, but it's also a trade-off that I think a lot of athletes at this level are frankly willing to make. We hear about the known trade-offs that athletes are willing to make to perform the best they can. And even if they know they might be doing something detrimental to their body, they'll sometimes still do it. Now, that said, we can assume that for the most part, some of the examples that we see of athletes, the way they fuel in the Olympics, they're probably pretty healthy individuals. We also need to keep in context that these are also very young individuals, which probably tend to be more resilient. But nonetheless, there's a lot of caveats here, but we can quickly look at their diets and see lots of things. And I think when Usain Bolt was, the fastest man in the world, I believe he ate like 100 chicken nuggets before he ran one of the races in the Olympics or something. And I'll link to some of the pieces that I've come across, but there's certainly a lot of candy, a lot of ice cream. I saw a few mentions of Pop-Tarts. Pancakes seem to be popular. Bagels seem to be popular. Let's see here. What else did I see? I think I mentioned ice cream. From a Whole Foods point of view, there is definitely a lot of fruit on athletes' menus. I'm pretty much sure every athlete, whether they were on the more processed end of the food spectrum or not, they had a lot of fruit in their diets. But one thing that can give us a clue as to why athletes are feeling this way happens to be another thing that I saw tends to be common between most of the Olympic athletes' diets that I've taken a peek at, is the fact that they almost all universally have some type of protein shake at some point in their day. And I think the reason why this is a useful insight is because protein shakes are generally viewed as healthy, but they're also one of the healthier processed foods. There's protein. You can't deny the fact that a protein shake is the ultimate processed form of protein. It's, what once used to be some kind of whey extract is broken down into this powder that you mix in water and you suck it down. So it does not represent what it originally was at all. Why are protein shakes so popular? Protein shakes are popular because they're easy to digest. It's a very simple way for them to get in their protein and meet their protein needs. They have high protein needs. They're athletes, right? Pretty much higher than certainly someone sitting on the couch. But at the same time, these athletes are training for 6, 8 hours a day, which means when they're not training and they need to eat something that's easily digestible. And I think that's where these processed foods come into play, whether it's a protein shake or it's something like pancakes or it's something like ice cream or it's something like gummy bears or whatever that these athletes are consuming. The reason why they're consuming processed foods probably has less to do with the fact that they're just like hyperpalatable processed foods. It's more to do with the fact that they're very easy to digest, because after they're done eating, they need to go back and train again. And if they have to digest a giant piece of steak that's in their stomach, they're probably going to barf because of the level of performance that they need to train at, the high level of intensity that they're training at. And so they're basically trading off the food, the ability to process and digest this food to get it into their system as fast as possible so that they can get back out and train as hard as they can, because training is what's going to get them to the Olympic Games and allow them to perform their best. And they might be sacrificing a little bit of health to get there because they're maybe choosing more highly processed foods. But honestly, they're at such a high level and such a high activity level that a lot of these detriment, but they're certainly not probably seeing massive glucose swings, blood sugar swings, because as soon as that stuff hits their body, they're just out there burning it right off. Maybe there's some chemicals in these foods that might be detrimental and et cetera. And someone could certainly make an argument about that. But from a fuel and calorie perspective, like they're looking for the most efficient way to digest the food that they need to do. And they need the biggest caloric bang that they can possibly get out of that food. And so why we usually, I usually talk about things like low caloric density, high volume foods like fruits and vegetables, et cetera. They're looking for low volume, high caloric density. And these are things that I would typically tell people to avoid: oils, olive oil, avocado oil, that type of stuff, or nut butters, or nuts and seeds, or fruit juices, things that are just like super easy to digest and come with a lot more calories. It's more efficient for an athlete who needs to get back out in the field to have a glass of apple juice than to have 6 apples, whatever the equivalent in whole apples are, because they just can't digest that by the time they need to get it back out and train again. So we can't. The other thing that we need to keep in mind here is that they have a very high caloric demand. They don't have a lot of time to eat their food and digest their food. And if they're underfueled for too long period of time, that's going to lead to compromising their goal. It can lead to not only poor performance in the acute sense, but it can lead to injury, illness, hormonal dysregulation, etc. And so if they choose these less calorically dense whole food options, they can not only just have severe digestive issues while they're training, but also underfuel themselves because they can't eat enough calories eating that food and just digest it all. They're really optimizing for performance. And to some degree, these processed foods are helping keeping them healthier than they would otherwise be, because they could suffer for injuries and hormonal dysregulation just purely to the fact that they're not going to be able to intake enough food and vitamins and minerals and that type of stuff. Now, the one thing that I wish these articles would highlight besides nutrition is the other aspects of their lifestyle that they're putting in to perform at these high levels, because it's not just nutrition that's getting them to the Olympics that allows them to perform at this level. It's their sleep. It's the way they train, how they train, how smart they train, when they're taking their rest days and the intensity which they're training at, etc. It's probably their stress management, their ability, what they're putting into recovering from all of this stress, physical stress that they're putting on their body. How do they mitigate the rest of the stress that's in their lives? how do they recover from all that physical stress? It also doesn't outline, it outlines like what their diet is, maybe in the moment that they can remember over the past, couple days or weeks or something like that. But lots of times athletes will use a periodized nutrition approach, right? Their nutrition changes along with the type of training that they're doing or where they are in their training cycle or how far away they are from their, the time they need to peak, etc. They, this is unlikely the diet that they eat all the time. This is like a snapshot into how they eat maybe over the past couple of weeks as they're leading into the Olympic Games, but their diet might shift, for example, after the Olympics or once they begin training again for their next training cycle or when they're in their off season. The other thing that it doesn't necessarily highlight or cover very well in many of the articles that I've read is that different sports have different training their fueling needs. And so lots of the more clicked on and highlighted news article type of diets out there are those of like aerobic endurance athletes. We don't see too many like weight class sports, for example, where you need to make a certain weight class. So many of the people, some of the competitors leading into the Olympics might be cutting weight to make weight for the Olympic Games because they need to weigh a certain amount heading into the games. And their diet might look very different than someone's who's an endurance athlete who's getting ready to go row several thousand miles or go run a marathon or is doing basketball or soccer or rugby or whatever the sport might be where there's more endurance involved. And there is no weight class per se for those sports. Those types of sports require a lot of fuel. They're played over long durations. And so the diets tend to be more extreme for those types of sports. And so you can't look at the diets of those athletes and then equate it to that's what every Olympic athlete is using or eating. Now, is there anything you can take away from looking at their diets besides, man, I wish I could have gummy bears and ice cream and cake and Pop-Tarts? I consider myself an athlete. I train for competitions. Am I a professional athlete? No way, not even close. But I put in about 2 hours of training every day. Not every day, most days of the week, probably 6 days of the week. So, Sunday's generally a rest day, but around 2 hours of training every day. And then I'm fairly active throughout the day, getting my 10 to 15,000 steps every day as well. So while I'm not at a level of a professional athlete training, I do train a fair amount and my performance is important to me. And I've gone down the path of underfueling before, and I've seen the detriments of doing that a variety of ways. It negatively impacted my health, and that's a story for another time. But I know that if you're not getting in enough calories, it can be bad for your health, even though a lot of people tout it as it being amazing, eating less and fasting and that type of stuff. But when you're an athlete, sometimes you can get yourself in trouble underfueling yourself. And so I understand where the concern is coming from for these Olympic athletes who are putting in far more work than I am and are performing at a much higher level. And I know how hard it is for me, who's doing less work, less intensity, less volume, to stick with whole natural foods when I really want to fuel my performance. When I'm trying to eat, I'm really concerned about performance and whatnot. When I'm trying to eat 3,000 calories a day, when I'm trying to eat more than 400 grams of carbs a day, to stick to a whole natural foods diet, which I honestly enjoy eating. I love to do it. And I know there's plenty of health benefits from it. It does put a stress on you. There's a lot of chewing. There's a lot of meal prep. There's a lot of just eating a lot of food, being uncomfortably full a lot of times. And sometimes it feels good to have a bowl of ice cream to pack in some calories sometimes. And yeah, it tastes good. It's great and everything. But frankly, it's just giving myself a break from all the eating. I understand where they're coming from. And I think that if you have gotten yourself into a healthy state, you're in a good body weight, all your blood markers look really good, and you're a fairly healthy person, all things considered, and you have some performance goals on your mind. You want to build muscle. You want to run a specific race. You want to compete in some kind of weightlifting competition, whether that's a formal thing or you're trying to get your 2K time on the rower down to a certain threshold just for the hell of it, just to see what you can do, or you want to see what the fastest 5K you can run is, or how far you want to run out a marathon by yourself. You want to do an ultra distance hike. You want to go for a hike for 15 hours or something like that out in the mountains. I don't, those are all athletic endeavors in my mind. And you have to fuel those activities properly. If you're healthy otherwise, you should probably consider starting to fuel yourself like an athlete, eating more calories. And if eating more calories means sometimes you got to throw in a little bit of more processed foods, you get some oatmeal in there, you're making a smoothie with nut butters and calorically dense foods, that type of stuff. Some of the things that I would otherwise, you would typically hear me say to exclude from your diet when body composition and health might be your concern. Sometimes you can deal with those types of foods. The human body is resilient. And when you're active enough, I think, and you're in a healthy state, I think you have some wiggle room there to start to play with those types of foods to see if it can get you to where you want to be from a performance perspective. Now, remember, I'm not saying eat like this and sit on your butt, and I'm not saying eat like this for the rest of your life, but for a short-term goal and you're trying to reach some level of peak performance or output or whatever, there can be some wiggle room for these foods in a diet. I think if that's some that reflects on you, then that resonates with you and what you're after, then I think that's good. Otherwise, for the average person that might just be looking to lose some weight and stuff like that, keep in mind that these people are in a different stratosphere, right? Now, they're not, this is not reflecting and saying these foods are healthy for every individual. They're they're using these processed foods for as a tool, basically, a tool to get a job done. And if otherwise they didn't have that job or the job was a different job, they wouldn't be using that tool. They're just using it as a tool in their toolbox. So think of it like that. And that's all I really got for you this week. Hope you found it interesting. I think it's interesting. I hope it's interesting even if you're not an athlete, but just a little perspective on some of the articles that you might see. And I'll try to link to some of them in the email and in the caption of the video, etc. So you can check them out for yourselves. But with that, if you like the content I'm putting out, you want to keep up with it on a weekly basis, please go to my best way to do that is to sign up for the newsletter. And you can do that by going to my website, rjbhealth.coach, click on the newsletter link at the top, enter your email address, and you can register for the newsletter. And you'll get all the content that I put out on a weekly basis right in your inbox. So it's very easy to keep up with what I'm putting out. And I do have a couple of one-on-one coaching spots. So if you are someone who's looking to optimize their performance or maybe achieve some type of athletic goal, whether that's in a competition or not, I can definitely help work with you. Like I said, I worked with athletes in the past and I am an athlete myself. Or if you're not an athlete and you're looking to do the opposite and or maybe get your health to the point where you can consider yourself an athlete and participate in some of these athletic competitions, I work with those type of people as well. But if you're interested in coaching at all, please reach out. You can go to my website again, rjbhealth.coach. There's a schedule discovery call button right on the homepage. You click on that and fill out the form, and I can get back to you. We can chat a little bit more about coaching if that's something you're interested in. But other than that, I hope everyone has a great weekend, enjoys the rest of the Olympics,